Welcome to the Port to Port podcast with Ronan.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Port to Port podcast, the podcast where we explore the world one port at a time. I'm your host Ronan, and today's guest is someone many of you will know if you've ever searched for cruise tips online. He's a YouTube powerhouse with over 460,000 subscribers. It's nearly at 470,000 now, and the creator for tips for travelers and one of the most respected voices in the cruise industry. It's Mr. Gary Bembridge. Gary, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. Thanks for having me on.
I'm a long-time fan. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. It's been a dream of mine since I started this podcast to get you on.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, that's good. Well, thanks for watching. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like we've myself and my wife have watched your videos. My wife is obsessed with you. So she's at work now, and she knows that I'm doing the recording today. So her name is Amy. So she'll be delighted for a shout out to Amy as well.
Oh, good. Well, it's a pity I missed meeting Amy then. Maybe on a cruise one day.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll meet you in person at some point. But
excellent.
I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. So Gary, let's start from the start. Let's go all the way back. So for listeners who might not know your full story, how did you first get into travel content and cruising in particular?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite a long sort of story, and it's partly by chance and hobby and stuff. So I've always been very kind of geeky, I guess. So I was always very interested in kind of that technology and stuff, but also sort of even growing up from a small age, I sort of aspired to be kind of a radio presenter, DJ kind of stuff. But that wasn't really what I decided I was never going to do that as a career. So I had a marketing job, which was great. Originally it was a European marketing job, then it was a global marketing job. I was traveling loads. And, at that time, so when I was doing that job in 2005, originally Apple launched podcasting. And I thought, well, this is great. I'm traveling a lot. And what I would do every time I went to a place, I had maybe a day before. So I might have a meeting, say, in Singapore at the beginning of the week, Sydney at the end of the week or something like that. So I thought, I've got a day in Singapore. I would search like crazy, know exactly what to do. So I thought, I've got this content that could be helpful to people. So I started the podcast. Then in 2006, YouTube launched. So I thought, this is fantastic. I'll experiment with that. So I started originally because I was traveling a lot. I literally started by videoing hotel rooms. So my channel just started being hotel rooms I was staying in, because I was staying in so many, partly to remind me and to show my mum and that kind of stuff. Then I was invited sort of at that same time period, sort of 2004, 2005, because I was one of those people that was like, I'm never going to go cruising. It sounds awful. It's boring. It's for old people, all the usual kind of stuff. And I was invited to go and talk on a ship on a marketing conference. So there's this company called Richmond Events would charter ships once or twice a year, and they would invite marketing people on and provide people selling services basically. And they invited me to go and talk. So I thought, I may as well go and do that. And then within less than a day of being on a ship, I kind of thought, I love this idea of cruising. I came back and said to my partner Margaret, we're going to go on a cruise and we're going to do QE2, because it sort of as a child I'd always been interested in transport, so the Orient Express called QE2, but I'd never really planned to do it. So we booked the QE2. And then I just started posting cruising content. Again, it was actually cabins, and then I was doing sort of random stuff. If it was in Vegas, I'd do Vegas stuff or whatever. So it was very kind of random. But I did start even then, my podcast, because I was one of the first ones doing it, would do very well on iTunes, charts and stuff. But I could see that my YouTube was doing quite well, but again, it was very erratic. But I started posting more and more and more cruising content, because that's what I was doing more of. So I stopped posting less of the hotels and stuff. And then I'd always decided, when I was in my 20s, that I was going to retire from corporate life when I was 55. And my plan was to do sort of marketing consultancy, because that's my background, travel more. And so when I did retire from corporate life, and I started, traveling a little bit more, going cruising more. And then at that time, I had a podcast still, I had a blog, and I had YouTube. And then I sort of thought, actually, I want to travel more. And I also made a decision at that time, I wanted to fund all my own travel. So part of my channel was going to be, I don't go on any free trips. I don't go on any sponsored trips, so I'm kind of independent and stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, obviously you need money to do that. So obviously, I had my kind of retirement pension and stuff, but that wasn't going to let me cruise a lot. So I thought about actually, YouTube is where you can make a living if you really focus and obviously build a big channel. In those days, between like 2016, 2017 time, nowadays you can make money out of podcasting. It was impossible then. There was no real way you could do it in any meaningful side. So I decided to really focus on YouTube. And so I brought my marketing kind of hat to it. So I started to focus much more. I spent a lot of time understanding how YouTube works. I thought to find my target, who I was talking to much more clearly, what the channel was going to be about, look to the data, because YouTube is just piles of data, and I adjusted what I was doing. I realized watch time was the most important thing to do. That was fundamental to the algorithms. I started changing the way I was making videos, I went more front of camera rather than voice, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So as I said, it's a bit slightly long story, but basically it was interesting because I really started to focus in 2018. I in 2018, I had something maybe like 5,000 subscribers or something. But by the time, 2 years later, by the time we hit pandemic, I was up to well over 100 something thousand subscribers. Again, subscribers is important, but views is important. So I went from like 100,000 a month views, up to 1 million, 2 million, and then now I'm around about 2 million, 2.5 million views a month kind of things. But really focusing is kind of how I got there. And sort of merging my passion with sort of marketing and stuff with my passion for cruising and sort of mashing those two together.
Yeah, no, it's like, because ever since we got into cruising, we've always been watching your videos. We've watched a couple of other, but like we're always like watching, okay, has Gary gone here? What's Gary done? And
right.
We try and go with that kind of way as well. Like, especially because I think I was on to you before when we went to Alaska, and I've messaged you about other things when we've gone to different places, and you've always given little tidbits about where to kind of go, which is always interesting as well.
We see, Ronan, that's perfect, because that's really how I sort of defined my target. It was for people who wanted to get cruising right, basically. Yeah. And we're kind of, cruising is quite complicated. And the more you learn about cruising, the more complicated it gets. This cabin and that ship and this line and this package, not that package, all those kind of things. So my target was around people who want to get cruising right, but are kind of, and want kind of guidance and help to make decisions, basically. And they wanted to, and that's what it was, also that sense of balance. So I try and talk about, if you're this, you're like this. If you're this, you won't like it. So it's great to hear that actually, what I set out to do,
it does work. No, it definitely works. It definitely works. Like, I suppose, how do you decide what cruises to go on or what topics you're going to cover? Is it based on trends, personal interest, or is it kind of what maybe audience members are asking you about? Yeah.
So Ronan, it's interesting. It's kind of a mash of stuff. So basically what I do is I do use audience surveys a lot. Obviously, I meet a lot of people on cruises. The great thing now is because a lot of people know me. So when I'm on a cruise, I get to talk to people, and they'll talk about how they've used the channel, or what I haven't covered. So that helps. I do quite a lot of stuff, particularly on YouTube, in the community tab, or they've changed it now to called post or something. I'll often ask people what they want me to cover. But what I sort of do is because I do plan way ahead in terms of what I'm doing. So I think, what haven't I covered for a while? So, for example, maybe 2 years ago, I thought, I need to go and revisit the big ships. So I booked to go on MSC, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, etc. Then I focused that was the year before. So I focused a little bit more on big ship experiences, and then how you can do it at a more luxury level, how you can do it at a more cost-effective level, compared all the ship within a ships, that sort of approach. Then last year, I focused a little bit more on destination stuff. I made sure I went to Japan, Alaska, etc. This year, I'm focusing a little bit more on new lines and new ships. Which just before we started, I went on Explorer Journeys.
Yeah.
I went on Crystal, the revamped Crystal, trying out the new class of Silversea ships. I would like to try some of the new MSC ships. I haven't got that booked yet, but so that I'll sort of focus on where I think my gaps are, or where I think stuff is out of date. So, for example, big cruising regions like the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, Alaska. Every couple of years, I'll go back and revisit those because they need to be up to date. So, I did a whole series on Alaska last year, focusing on Alaska on a budget, for example, because lots of people have said, we want to go to Alaska, it's really expensive, and oh my goodness, now I've realized how expensive the excursions are. So then I thought, okay, I'll do a whole thing around how you can do Alaska without spending $600 in every port on excursions. So I think I sort of plan a bit like that, and then obviously I meld in stuff that I like to do. I'm not a personally a big ship person, but so I try and weave in some stuff that I sort of do for myself. But I struggle a bit because even when I go away, like my partner Mark's working full time. So when we go together, like at Christmas, we were doing a Panama Canal. And I've made videos about Panama Canal and before, and it's like, right, this is going to be a holiday, a vacation. By the time we boarded it, that had gone out the window, and I was filming and like planning what videos I was making and stuff. But yeah,
Okay, yeah.
so
Well,
yeah,
yeah, like that happens. I think, yeah, when you get on a cruise, and especially if you're into like blogging and taking pictures, like it does go out the window if you're like, I'm gonna just relax on this, but then you're like, oh my God, I need to do this. So I need to show people.
Exactly, and because because I love it so much. People often ask me, like I've been on a lot of cruises, and do I still enjoy cruising? But absolutely, I just love it to bits. And particularly because I go on lots, because what I do, I go on lots of ships and lots of different ships. So there's always, most times it's a new ship I'm going on or a new line or something. So I'm just excited about kind of discovering it. So it's impossible not to. So I have to go on land-based trips to have a vacation, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what next week we're going away. And we don't usually do like a lot of land trips unless like it's a big city like break. We've gone to America on big city breaks, but next week we're just doing a sun holiday, which is like the first time in 10 years that we've done it. Normally, like we're going to Japan at the end of the year for 3 weeks.
Fantastic.
But like 12 nights on Celebrity Millennium, but we're doing Tokyo for a week just to kind of get into.
Oh, brilliant.
But we need a
I
break.
love, yeah. Tokyo is incredible. I love Tokyo. It's just like incredible. Yeah.
It's like it seems to be the place that everybody wants to go to at the moment. Like everybody that I know is either there or is going there this year.
Yeah, it's become very hot. Like in fact, friends of mine just messaged me yesterday saying we finally booked Japan, and you're right. There's lots of people I know that are kind of there and stuff. It's and it's interesting because the cruise lines, I think, with coming out of COVID, a lot of them didn't reschedule going back to China. I guess there's lots of cruise lines that's finding it harder in Australia to make money in Australia. So Japan seems to have done a good job at, obviously, I suspect lines, but also, so there's lots of opportunities to go to Japan as well, I think.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's got, and they've done a good job at getting enthusiasm about Japan going.
100%. Yeah, because like I think it's good for if you just want to go to Japan and you want to see as much of it. Sometimes a cruise is probably a good choice because you're getting to stop off at so many ports along the way, whereas you mightn't be able to do that if you're on a land holiday there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I suppose, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about cruising that you try to correct sometimes if it ever comes up?
I mean, the biggest one is around cruising is not for me because it's for other people, whether it's because, and people have different reasons. So maybe it's for old people, although particularly in the US, that's shifting because I don't think cruising seen as an old people thing. It's still a little bit in the UK and maybe and Europe and stuff. But, or they just think I'm going to be trapped or it's too boring or whatever. So that's the big thing for me, is it's not for me. And so the thing that I really try and focus on is trying to get people on a ship, but get people on the right ship. And the story that I often tell to people is, I've been with my partner now for 21 years, I've come up for 22 years, something like that. And I've been trying to get his sister on a ship forever. And she was only willing to consider going on a ship, just after COVID, because her husband was much more nervous about traveling post-COVID and sort of been really affected by COVID and stuff. They were like, okay, we want to go away. We don't want to just stay in the UK. So we'll try a cruise. So I got them to go on P&O, which is not a line that I'm a big fan of personally, but I knew they would love it because they would be surrounded by Brits. It would be Brits, food, Brits, comedy, everything would be they would feel very comfortable. And they said, okay, we'll give it. And I sent them to Norway because, it's hard not to love the fjords.
Yeah. And
they came back, and I think they have now, so they went like 18 months ago, something like that. They have been on 7 cruises since then and have about another 7 booked. It's because, so that was the point, is like breaking down that get you on the right line. Now, they then made the mistake. They then fell into the trap of, they went on what the cheapest thing was, and they were like, oh my God, we don't like NSC, or they went on Virgin and they found it wasn't for them. So they've realized that what's sort of the line, but just getting people to give it a go and getting them on the right line. Because if you get people to try it on the right line, I feel like 9 out of 10 people will will be back. So that's the biggest misconception, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Like there's a load of people that I know and they're just like, but why do you like cruising? And it's just like, you need to try it. You need to see what happens.
Exactly.
And you need to like just try it for even if you don't want to do like a week, do 3 or 4 nights just to just get used to it. And I guarantee like they'll get hooked on it, because it's like we've done 10 cruises so far. We did 7 with MSC, we've done 2 with Celebrity, and we've done one with Princess, and we're doing Celebrity again in Japan. And like MSC was fine to start with, but it's a different, where we kind of want to move up a bit on the levels, because what we did South America with MSC last year, and it wasn't great. It was kind of the worst one that we've done with MSC, so we decided to move on and try Celebrity and kind of stick with Celebrity for the moment.
I mean, it's interesting, actually. That's a good point, I think, because it's also because people often ask me, what's your favorite cruise line? And my point is, like, I don't have a favorite cruise line. I have some that I really like, but a lot of it depends on where I'm going, to your point, and who I'm going with. And obviously there's budget and those issues, because you're right. I think importantly, like, who you go with, like you're talking about going to Japan, for example, Celebrity has their smaller class of ships on there because they can go to more Zuti ports or whatever. Yeah. You're right. And they're more likely to have better excursions or more cultural stuff. You wouldn't want to go, say, on a Carnival ship there, because it's going to be, not that they go there, but it's going to be a different experience. You might want to go on a Carnival ship with a group of, mates for a party in the Caribbean. So that's quite important, I think, about also, choosing the line that suits who you're going with and where you're going. I guess is kind of
100%. Yeah, because we went during Carnival season. And
right.
We went to Carnival in Sao Paulo. It was amazing. Then we went to Santos. We got on the ship in Santos, and like, we've never had any issues with MSC prior to this one. But when we got there, no one spoke English. And then when we got on board, I was talking to one of the crew members, and he was like, oh my God, he's like, you're the only English people on board the ship. Everybody else is Portuguese. This is just a Carnival cruise. But like, nobody told us that, or kind of gave us a heads up to let us know about that. And then all the food was catered just for what they'd like for their Carnival. And it wasn't what we were used to then. So it didn't help.
Yeah. Yeah, because they go hyper local when they do, because they really are very much catering for the Brazilian or whatever community.
It was just party. It was insane.
Draining.
It's unbelievable. What was even worse was, like, some of the parties didn't start. Like, normally on the normal ships and the cruises that we've done, the parties might start at 10 and they'd finish at midnight. These ones didn't start till midnight and ran till 4 a.m. all the time. It was the dinners. You couldn't get like a 6 o'clock dinner. It was either 8 or 10.
Right.
So it was a totally different, and we weren't used to that. But like, we still enjoyed getting off the ship and seeing, like, we've got to go to Uruguay, and we got to go to Argentina, and it was still really cool to see it. But because we were the only English speaking people on the ship, we couldn't go on the excursions that we had booked. So they had changed all that. So that's something that I've always tried to get out to people since then, is that just read into everything and do a bit of research.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because I went to that point. I went to just at the after the shutdown. It's in November 21, just when Omicron was kind of resurging, and I went on Ponant to Antarctica, because they had the best itinerary in terms of going to South Georgia. Obviously, a French line, but something like 90% of the ship was French, and there was this group actually of American Koreans who were on as a group, so they were kind of a little group. But there was then a group of Americans who spent most of the time complaining about the food being too French. And it's sort of like it's just their travel agent hadn't done a really good job of, this is a French line, you're probably going to have lots of French. They also didn't like that so much stuff was done in French. And they were very good at giving us talks. We had all the expedition team would give us talks in English and stuff like that. But obviously a lot of stuff was done in French, and the crew, I mean, obviously they got to know you, but like when the captain would do his talk, he would do it mostly in French and then a little bit in English. And they found that they really didn't like that. And it's like, it's like, you have to understand, like, I went on Hapag-Lloyd German as well line, and I knew that there was maybe 8 or 10 or something English speakers on. So you're right, you have to be ready for that.
Yeah.
But Yeah.
You see, we were so used to MSC on any of the other cruises because normally they do multiple
In six
languages.
languages. Yeah, yeah. Everything's done 6 times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but none of that happened. So we were like, okay. I think they called out stuff 3 times in English from the
Right,
bridge, and
right,
that was literally it.
right,
So
right.
it
Yeah.
was different, but we still enjoyed it. But the food is a bit different to what we were used to as well.
Right. Yeah.
So like when you step onto a ship, like a brand new ship for the first time, what's your approach? What are you looking for to show your audience?
So, a lot of it depends on a lot of it depends. So, I often before I go on a trip, I normally know what it is I want to cover. Because if you don't, I mean, it's just impossible. Like if you want to cover the destinations and the ship and the cruise line and so I normally have a view about what I'm going to do. So, for example, so that will vary a lot. So before I get on, I know what I'm going to do. So I already know, and I sort of have scoped out roughly what I think even the story is likely to be based on what I've observed and watched and stuff. For example, this last trip that I'll use the last trip as an example. So I did the Explorer Journeys, Explorer 2, so the second of their ships, the most recent of their ships, and it was an itinerary to Canary Islands. But I chose that not so much the itinerary, but partly because it was long enough that I knew I could experience the ship. So I knew the destinations were not at all important. I wasn't going to cover the destinations at all. Okay. So I boarded the ship, trying to look at the whole process from the time I got to, well, actually even before the cruise. I was looking at how their site didn't work in their case. So that wasn't less, but through to the whole process of getting on board, etc. And so I was very focused on that. So when we got to port, I didn't, the only time I sort of did go out on port mostly to film the exterior of the ship. So if I went and did anything in port, I didn't, like, was just for me, toddle off or whatever. So that's really how I kind of approach it. So, also, because with Explorer 2, I don't normally do ship tours because there are other people I think that do a much better job of ship tours, like Car Travel and people like that, who's my go-to place for ship tours. So I wouldn't normally do a ship tour, but I know with Explorer, for example, people will ask me lots of questions, much more than they would normally do about the ship because it's new. And there's not a lot of content around it. So I did spend much more time thinking, I'm also going to review the ship. So I spend much more time videoing and looking at every aspect of the ship facilities and stuff like that, as well as then the program and the overall kind of experience. So it does vary kind of based on what I'm doing. But the important thing is, I guess, is before I go, but we'll come back to the question you asked me earlier. I sort of know why I'm going on the trip when I plan it ahead. Yeah. And then close to the time, I scope out what it is. Like I know, I'm going to make, like, for example, Explorer Journeys, I knew I'm going to make 2 videos, one about Explorer Journeys as an experience as a cruise line, all the questions people have been asked before I go. And then I'm going to say what I think of the ship. So I already know 2 videos. I know when they're going to go out. So I always have this. Yeah. I like spreadsheets. That's my old corporate day. So now I know whenever I go on a trip. So I have a spreadsheet which kind of has, I know for this year roughly what videos I'm going to make, roughly. Obviously it varies and changes and stuff. Okay. So in my mind, I kind of sort of know. But normally when I get on board a ship, I'd spend that afternoon kind of learning the layout of the ship. And often I like it to book a cruise which has a sea day as the first day, to again just get a feel for everything. So often, although I might start videoing stuff, but I spend that first sort of day and a half just kind of getting a feel of the ship, sitting, listening, and then I spend a lot of time. So I'm going for a tangent probably, but I spend a lot of time talking to people because a lot of people come and talk to me, and I spend quite a lot of time listening into people, like in the coffee shop or often on an excursion, and just hear what people are talking about. So sort of kind of earwigging or whatever it is, because I learn a lot from that, hearing what people are complaining about, what they're liking about. So I do spend quite a lot of time sort of lurking, as it were, not in an ominous way, but but it is quite interesting, hearing, getting a feel for what other people are thinking, so I can kind of build it in. Because often hear my videos, I'll say like, I felt this, but a lot of people told me that they felt this. Because one of the things I also try and have to separate out a little bit is, often the cruise line, people on the cruise line will know me, because a lot of the crew watch my videos.
Yes.
And often a lot of the senior crew watch our videos. So, or they've, because, crew move around. So, like on my last cruise, a hotel director remembered me from a Holland America trip, and stuff. So I also have to make sure that I'm not, for some reason, some people are sort of, I'm being treated differently. I don't see that a lot, because in reality, on a cruise line, you've got 6,000 people if you're on Norwegian, or even on this, 700 something people. It doesn't happen, a lot. But I also want to be aware if I feel that's happening. So
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, no, because I think I'd seen as well that you got to go to dinner with the captain or something on the last.
yes, yeah. So I mean that absolutely was because of my channel, because the
Okay.
person who decided who was invited was the hotel director.
Okay. Yeah.
So he invited me because I mean I guess he tells the captain who to invite. So I assume they invited people in the top cabins. I suspect, what I
Okay.
fathomed
Yeah.
out, and then they sort of I filled. They had one spot. They had one spot clearly with a number of people. I don't know how many people they originally invited, but there was even numbers with me. If you know what I mean.
Oh,
But
okay. Yeah.
but he invited me because obviously because he knew I had the channel and stuff. And actually, I'd met the captain boarding, sort of coincidentally as well. But yes, but in that case, I wouldn't have been invited others because I wasn't in the best cabin. I wasn't like
Right. Okay.
a
Yeah.
loyal Explorer Journeys person. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I suppose you were saying you don't really have favorites, but do you have any kind of cruise lines where you think are kind of they stand out to you more than others?
Yeah, I mean, and so it's across all kind of grades and levels. I do. So for example, if you look at the sort of the resort line, as I call it, I mean, for me, I just think what Royal Caribbean does is phenomenal. They just understand their audience so well. They understand crowd management so well. Yeah, I often give the anecdote about how I get on. If I go on a Royal Caribbean ship, I'm on the ship faster than if I go on a luxury or premium line, just because they have to get people through and stuff,
Yeah.
and they know how to they're districts and they know how to move people around and stuff like that. So I really admire a line like Royal Caribbean. I'm a big fan, in that sort of premium category. I do gravitate towards Holland America and Celebrity in that sort of category. Celebrity partly because I like the fact that you can have very different experiences, with the Edge class, the Solstice
Yeah.
class, and then the class, the Millennium class and stuff. And I like and that they sort of they put those ships in where they work best, kind of thing. On America, I just like because it's sort of it's hard to explain why I like on America. I just kind of always have a good time on America. Although they focus on less, I like the focus on music, for example, which
Okay.
they
Yeah.
dial that back. I mean, Cunard I used to really like a lot in that sort of because it's the only line where you can go and dress up these days
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
In that sort of more luxury space, I'm a big fan of Oceania and Windstar. Windstar because of course they're really small kind of ships. Oceania, I just like their ships and I like their kind of focus on food, although they get more mixed reviews. And then more premium end, I was very impressed with Explorer Journeys. I mean, I think they're still evolving and developing that. They position themselves more kind of ultra luxury. I'm quite sure they've got there yet, but they'll get there because they're still learning. And I really like Regent and Silversea because they are very sort of focused on, their ships. They have quite a modern fleet. They're clearly investing in their fleets, and they have really good, because they offer excursions as part of that package and that all includes things. And the excursions generally are pretty good as well. So, so that's sort of those are the lines that I sort of would gravitate towards personally based on what I was doing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, like I think since we started going with Celebrity, like we've just noticed the difference when it comes to the food, the entertainment. No, there's nothing wrong with the entertainment that we had on MSC and Princess, but the food level has just jumped up dramatically when it comes to Celebrity cruises, I think. And like we've done Celebrity Edge in Alaska, we did Silhouette, and then we'll have been on the Millennium by the end of the year as well. So we've kind of experienced.
So you've tried all three classes, yeah, which is great because you'll see the kind of the differences and nuances of things,
Yeah, and like I actually I've been on like MSC Seaside, like that's probably the biggest ship I've been on. But I've also been on MSC's like smaller ones, and to be honest, I actually prefer being on the smaller ones to the bigger ones.
Like the Preziosa and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Like we've done Preziosa twice. We've been on Sinfonia. We've been on Musica. So like we've gone even smaller than the Preziosa as well.
Yes, I think I've been on Lyrica and the one they stretched. I've forgotten what it's called now.
I know the one you're talking about, but I can't remember.
Not Serenade, but anyway, yeah.
They cut it in the middle and they just added. I remember that. Yeah. Was that the orchestra?
Yes, I think it might have been the orchestra.
Yeah,
it might have been
the orchestra. Yeah.
But that was a bit like your experience. You're saying where that was. I did a relatively short, and I think I felt like I was the only English speaker, but they still did everything in 6 languages.
Oh, okay.
But I couldn't find it. There was no English excursions, but it was fine because everything else was
Yeah.
multilingual. But yeah,
I used Google Translate to try to help on the
right.
excursion. It didn't help, but I tried to come up with something. So is there any standout ports or destinations that have completely surprised you in a good way?
Completely surprised me in a good way. I mean, Antarctica still is the standout, just because you expect Antarctica to be incredible, and no matter what you look at, what you watch, once you're there, just completely kind of surpasses it. I think I found particularly a lot of the ports in Japan, and the reason that's partly surprised me is they've evolved so much to be much more tourist facing. So I first went to Japan on a cruise in 2016, and then I next went like almost 10 years, whatever. No, I went in 2016, I went in 2023 or 24, and just seeing how much more kind of tourist friendly they become. And so I felt it was much easier as an English speaking tourist to get around, but just the culture and the people and stuff. So most of the Japanese ports particularly. Let me think what else is. I think a lot of the Costa Rican ports as well, because I hadn't really expected that, but just because they're so eco kind of focused, it was really interesting, and they have this love for kind of nature and the forest. So going into the rainforest kind of stuff was just amazing.
Yeah.
Those are probably the ones that kind of come to mind.
And is there any that didn't live up to expectations when you kind of went there?
Let me think. If there's any? I can't think of any. There are sometimes there's ports which never live up, which always kind of disappoint. I guess is the ports which are many around the world, lots in Europe, where you think you're going to Paris and you're going to Le Havre, or you think you're going to Florence, you're going to Livorno, and you're basically, or you're going to Marseille on a big ship and you're in this container port area.
Yeah.
So those are always a little bit disappointing, because even though you sort of know in your mind, you can often go on a cruise. And I'm trying to think what I did. I think it was when I was in Norwegian Viva, October last year, and we went to all these kind of iconic ports, Civitavecchia and that. But you realize unless you were investing in an hour and a half in every port, you were basically in a container port. And that was always disappointing, because even though I know it, it's sort of like if you're not really up for that commute into an hour and a half away, there's not, you're in a container port, and that's probably where it's more disappointing. If that's the right.
I know. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, because it actually happens in Cove as well, because we've got the main port is in Cove, but if there's another ship also coming in, what they'll do is they'll send that to Ringaskiddy, which is opposite the other side of the harbor. Okay. And you don't have any access to Cove then, because you're in a kind of totally different spot that's like cars and other things are thrown over there, and like they'd still bus people into, and they'll still do all the excursions, but you're not in Cove where you might have wanted to go originally.
Yeah, because the great thing is I've only been right docked in. You literally can wander off and you're right in town, and it's good. Yeah. So it's more that, which is probably doesn't quite answer your question, but it's sort of like it's more that.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Disappointing. Yeah.
I suppose, do you prefer cruises that are heavy in sea days or are more port intensive? I know you were saying like you like to have a couple of sea days in the sense that you can record on the ship when you're on there, but what do you personally prefer?
I like that. My ideal cruise is 1 day on, 1 day off kind of thing, or 1 day on, because you have that chance to then think, okay, I'm really going to intensively explore a port, but then you have a couple of days afterwards. Actually, so this itinerary I was just on, even though I didn't spend a lot of time in ports, was actually great, because you'd almost have a sea day at port, you'd have a sea day port, sea day 2 ports, sea day at port. It was actually brilliant, because you could actually, you felt you got value out of, because you're seeing quite a few ports in that 11 days. But also you were getting your value out of the ship. You had a chance to go to the restaurants at lunchtime. You knew that you could stay up late to watch the shows or whatever, or stay up late gambling, whatever you wanted to do, or partying or whatever. So I quite like that rhythm. Also, that makes my life so much easier just in terms of filming stuff, because if I want to go and look at and checking out stuff, because it means if there's lots of sea days, I can go to a couple of trivias, I can go to bingo, I can go to the talks, I can actually spend a bit more time seeing how things are working. If there's heavy port days, it's much harder, because those events are sort of, there's maybe a few of them, or they're all rammed together and stuff. So it's sort of, because I always just look at things with the creator hat on, I guess.
Yeah, like I think we like I like getting off the ship and I like exploring, but I think it's great with sea days because it's forcing you to relax and it's forcing you to kind of enjoy the ship more as well, I think.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that we did realize, though, is in 2016 we did like half a world cruise, which was great. But at that time, Mark had just sold his law firm and was taking some time up before he went back, because he wanted to go back on client side, and actually just wanted to chill and relax. The problem, what we realized, is if we were ever to do a world cruise, we wouldn't do that approach, because you'd have 6 sea days, sort of between Los Angeles and Hawaii. Then you might have 4 sea days between there and Samoa or whatever. And actually, there was just too many sea days, because actually, you in that space of 7 weeks, we maybe only went to 15 ports or something. So that was quite, that's what I realized. That's why that mix is kind of really important.
Yeah.
Because I want to see places, but I want to enjoy the ship. It's just getting that balance right.
Yeah, you definitely need the balance, because like I like experiencing different cultures, different foods of the places that we're going to, but at the same time I like being on the ship and seeing what the ship has to offer as well.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any kind of trends in the last year or two that like cruising is starting to bring in, that they're trying to kind of push now on all different kind of brands of different cruise lines?
Yeah, I mean the big push without a shadow of a doubt is to get more families on board. I mean, they all, we always think, I guess in the cruising industry, we always think cruising's so huge, but you realize that cruising is tiny. I can't remember what the percentage is. They're like 3, 4, 5% of travelers have ever been on a cruise or something like that. Don't quote me on the number, but it's really small in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, because all cruise lines, certainly after the shutdown, are very much focusing on new to cruise, and very much focusing particularly on families. Like, you'll see lines which you never expected chasing families, like Holland America. You'll see they'll run kids travel free promotions. I mean, Explore Journeys is really interesting. They're really pushing families very hard, even though a lot of people, even on my, we sort of out of school holiday season, a lot of people were like, in their mind, because it was luxury, it was going to be an adult only, and they were suddenly surprised all these toddlers are around. So you're seeing even your Silver Sea Seaborns, Princess, all of them are becoming much more kind of family focused. So I think that's key. They're trying to attract new people. And I think it's also interesting, if one was a bit skeptical, certainly, and again, it's interesting with my sister-in-law, is my sister-in-law came back and said, all these people were moaning about all the cuts. And she said, I thought it was fantastic what we got, because of course, new to cruise are comparing often land-based vacation, resort vacations. Yeah. So actually the fact that the chocolates at night have gone, and the two times a day room servicing has gone, they don't really notice that, because in hotels they're used to once a day or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think the advantage with new to cruise is there's probably less people moaning than our style cruises. So I think that is definitely definitely trying to get new people on, and families much more. And I think it's, in some ways, it's interesting, because there's definitely, it feels like they're also missing an opportunity to have more adult. I think there'll be a pushback where people realize there's more of an opportunity for adults only opportunities. Yeah. For example. So I think that's one trend. I think, the other trend, of course, is, trying to finding ways of generating onboard revenue. So lines are, things that used to be included, less included. So, in Holland America, lobster is now an additional charge. On other cruise lines, it's an additional charge.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So, and it's interesting, because I do see, I follow quite a lot, all the cruise lines reports, every quarter, the stuff they do to Wall Street and stuff. And it's really interesting, because they do talk about, fares going up, demand's going up. So a lot of ships are selling over 100% capacity, because obviously people are bringing more kids on board, sharing cabins, but they specifically report very actively the onboard spend and how they're actively pushing that number up. So it's not just people's perceiving a lot of people will nickel and dime it. That will to split things out. So that's why it's always interesting when you get, new lines like Explorer including so much. Admittedly, the fares are very high, but I feel like that more pick and mix. The third one I think is the day of dressing up on cruises is kind of gone. I know Cunard is sort of clinging on a bit, and I think it's a pity in a way that there's not at least one or two lines that say, actually, we're a dress-up line. So that's what we do. That's what we can offer. But maybe over time, there's just not enough demand. It's I used to quite like the dressing up thing, just because it was different. I'd ended on land, but I'm in that camp, which is actually I get it.
Yeah. Where the say like celebrity have like chic night where you can still dress up, but like I used to wear like a 3-piece suit and the whole lot.
Yeah.
And to be fair, a lot of people were still dressing up, but it got to the point I was just bringing the suit just for photos, and then I'd have dinner and I'd immediately go home. I'd go back to the cabin and I'd change.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like it's because like I was on Regent, and the first time I went on Regent, I thought, this is, it's really expensive. The fares are expensive. It's very upmarket. It's going to be very dressy. And I think I packed a suit and a jacket and stuff. And I didn't wear it once because nobody did. Because even on their whatever, the same thing, chic or whatever they call it, night. Yeah. You could wear a polo shirt if you wanted to. I might wear a long sleeve shirt and sort of, you wouldn't wear jeans, but that's as dressy as it got. And there's very few cruises where I take it. I think Silver Sea, I went on Silver Sea, I felt I needed to wear a jacket. Like people were still a bit, you need to wear a jacket, but like it's gone. I think the dress up thing's gone. And it'd be interesting to see how much it goes down or whether there's a push, because at the moment it's interesting on Explorer, which again have launched into that sort of luxury, ultra luxury space. You can wear jeans to dinner if you want to. A few of the others are still you can't wear jeans. I know like on Norwegian you can wear shorts if you want to. So it's going to be interesting to see where it settles down. I think Princess have done an interesting approach because they sort of almost differentiating some dress codes almost by restaurant. I think on some of their bigger ships, if I say they've got in one main dining room, they're having a slightly more dressy code, and the one slightly less dressy code. I think, so that's quite interesting. See where that all settles down. But definitely the day of suits and definitely tux is like gone.
Definitely tux is like
except on Cunard. I mean, you can if you want to, but even now you're seeing more people just wearing a suit.
Okay. Like when we were on Celebrity Edge in Alaska last year, I think we were queuing up to go into the main dining room, and there was people ahead of us. The guy had a Hawaiian shirt on and shorts, but to be fair, they did ask him to go back and change. They were like, you can't come in, and that, which I was surprised because I thought they were just going to let him walk in, because a lot of the ships are now kind of like, oh, you can do what you want.
Yeah, it's interesting. It isn't because it's quite difficult for the crew, because like the risk of them is quite high, because they know they're probably going to get attitude if they don't enforce it, for people who want to enforce it, and attitude for people who do enforce it. But you're right, I've seen that on Celebrity and also on Princess in Alaska, where people, because it is very casual on those trips generally speaking, and people were turned away with shorts. I don't know if they allowed jeans, because a lot of cruise lines theoretically you can't wear jeans. But I think the cruise, the dress code thing that feels like that's gone.
Yeah. And I suppose there's a lot of talk as well about sustainability and smaller ships. Do you think the industry is moving fast enough to what people want?
Well, it's interesting, Ron, because probably one of the worst performing videos I've ever had on my channel was one I did about cruising and environment and what the cruise industry does. And my sense is that most cruise passengers don't really care. They just expect the lines to get on with it, as it were. So, and it's interesting, when I was on this last trip, I was talking to, at that dinner you were talking about that I got invited to, I was fortunate enough to be sitting next to the chief engineer who does all of the new builds, both used for MSC, I think before I was doing for Explorer. And I was asking him about, this whole issue about what's going on. And he was saying, look, there's this move to LNG, but just before it happened is Viking announced that they were launching a hydrogen, is that right? Hydrogen ship. And I read it at Sea Trade, Torsten Hagen, I think that's the guy's name, who runs Viking or created Viking. And he was like, I think LNG is a complete red herring and hydrogen's the only way to go. And that's the future. And that was interesting, because what this chief engineer was sort of saying to me is, in reality, that's the future. LNG is just a stepping stone. So I feel like the cruise lines, need to do more faster, but I know there's restrictions, but they need to find a way of moving there faster. I guess technology is, because I was asking like how much hydrogen, how hard is it to get it? And the point is not that many ports yet. Like I was asking about plugging in electrics. He's saying lots of ships can plug in at port electrics, but there isn't the infrastructure in ports yet. And there's big arguments about who funds that. If hydrogen is the way to go, you still have to get hydrogen from wherever you get hydrogen from, and all the infrastructure. Like you're saying with LNG, like their new ships, LNG, lots of the ships, Prince from the new Princess, Carnival, etc., ships, MSC ships are LNG. But he's still saying actually you're still relatively limited where you can bunker that stuff. So the problem is there's a whole infrastructure thing. But I feel like they're not moving fast enough. But I can sort of see why they're not moving fast enough. But I'm not as convinced that there's huge pressure from passengers. There's sort of an expectation, but they sort of turn a blind eye. That's the right way to put it.
Yeah, they're doing enough to keep people happy.
Yeah. I feel like they just need to. I feel like they need to do more, but I guess technology limits. I know there's a few ships that are now like hybrid and electric, but I think they are going to be the smaller ships. What I do think is interesting, come back to a slightly different tack on sustainability, is the whole thing of ports and over tourism. And I think that's very interesting because it feels to me like the cruise line's going in one direction, bigger and bigger. Carnival have announced 3 like 8,000 passenger ships. So, and an Icon and like World America's got 6,700 and so. But there seems to be cruise lines seems to be investing in bigger and bigger and bigger ships. But we're seeing all these protests in Barcelona and Marseille and Nice and Venice, people saying this it's over tourism. Now, I know some of that's not necessarily all related to cruise. A lot of it's land-based because people are upset about rent, to Airbnb and stuff. But I feel like there's a disconnect between local communities are wanting fewer people and cruise lines are bringing more people. So that's, I think, really interesting, which is, I know there's more and more private islands, coming and more investment in private islands. But I feel like there's also, I don't quite understand why there's that big disconnect. I'm sure there's a good reason for it, and whether there's going to be more private islands and private places to go.
Because like that, I think when we were in Alaska last year, the people in Juneau,
right,
we had read about that they wanted less boats coming in. Because there was they have a way less amount of people who are the population is tiny even compared to Cove where I live. And they had, on one of the days I was there was at least 4, if not 5 cruise ships in the one day, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean they had with Juneau they did the referendum or poll, what it was called, where they were talking about banning any ships over a certain amount on a Saturday, which actually didn't get passed because actually I think the business lobby kind of out-lobbied the other lobby. But right. They have slightly reduced the numbers. But right, there's quite a few places, like a couple of places, ports in Canada have stopped ships coming in over a certain size. And it's going to be interesting to see where that kind of where that settles. But yeah.
For first-time cruisers who might feel a bit overwhelmed, what would you say your top 3 tips for them would be?
For first-time cruisers, top 3 tips. I think one of them is actually, which I encourage people to do, is to find a really good travel agent. Because, but not a lot of people go the wrong way with travel agents. They'll go off and they'll go to something.com or whatever. A person who's an absolute expert at cruising. And I think on sites like the Clear site, the Cruise Line Association, you can find those. Or I actually have some that I recommend to my followers. But people who kind of really love cruising, know cruising, often independent, they work for themselves. So most people I recommend, they work for a bigger group like travel counselors, or I can't remember the name in the US, but they actually work for themselves. So they live or die based on how well they serve you because they're not part of a bigger corporation. But someone who really understands, who will then spend time understanding what do you like, what don't you like, what's your budget, and they can figure out the right cruise line, the right cabin location, the right packages, have it all as a drinks package, blah, blah, blah. That for me is the critical tip. And a lot of people always come and say, oh, it was a terrible idea because I had this terrible travel agent. It's about finding the right travel agent. So finding some recommendation. So that would be the first thing. The second tip, which is sort of linked to that, but it's so important, is absolutely make sure that you're getting on the right cruise line. And the third one is about budgeting, which is, when you're looking at, don't make the mistake of saying, oh my God, I can go on this MSC trip, let's say the Caribbean. 7-night MSC trip for 100. And I'm going to go on that because the Princess trip is 150 and the Oceania trip's 300 or whatever. But actually understand from the time you leave home, certainly the time you board the ship, the time you get off, do the budget, because you might be surprised. You might find, okay, I'm going to go on my Norwegian or MSC and it was 100, but then I'm going to spend another 100 on board with dining, Wi-Fi, blah, 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 which is going to get me to 200. If I go on Princess, the fare's 150, but I'm only going to spend 50 on board. So actually I could maybe go on a Princess. So actually really look at that port-to-port budget, because all the data would say that most people spend between 50% and at least 100% of the fare on board on many lines. So that's, I think, the mistake that people make is they, even my sister-in-law, she was talking back, came back and said, "Oh my God, we spent so much more on board than I thought." It's like, we did talk to you about the drinks package, this, the Wi-Fi, so really do that budget. So, because also you may find out that you need to cut back on some areas, but you've budgeted properly. So you don't go away thinking it's costing you 100 and you realize it actually was 200. Can I give a fourth tip?
Yeah,
I'll give a fourth tip as well. So the thing that I encourage people to do is track your fares. Now, a lot of cruise lines don't like, a lot of cruise lines won't do, but prices generally are going upwards nowadays. So there's less time when fares go down. And a lot of cruise lines now will build in their terms and conditions that they won't match fares. But a lot of cruise lines will. So if you've booked, again, that trip to the Caribbean at 100, and you suddenly realize, and if you track, there's sites where you can track fares, so it'll do it for you and it'll flag up if fares have gone down. But if you suddenly discover actually you've booked for 100 in, let's say an ocean view cabin or whatever, and it's now selling for 80, some cruise lines, if you go back to them, will either cut the fare or give you extra onboard credit or whatever. So, I get emails every week from people that follow that tip saying, "Thanks so much." Sometimes that's a lot. I mean, the most I've got back is like $1,200 on a fare, which is enormous. It was like about, almost a third of what I paid, or no, about 40% of what I paid back. To track fares. Some cruise lines will tell you to go away, but it's worth it. It's worth doing.
Like, to be fair to Celebrity, when we booked the Japan cruise when we were in Alaska, and to be fair to the guy, when we booked, like, we put the deposit down, all the rest of it, he was like, if the price drops between now and when you come on the next one, we'll match that price, and if there's an extra onboard spend, we'll give you the extra onboard spend. You just need to talk to your travel agent. So the price hasn't gone down, it's gone up, but it's like
I mean, these days generally speaking, prices are going up, not coming down, but but it's worth because sometimes they will come down, and some people get very frustrated because certain lines are just very unhelpful. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. You just have to ask, and if they say no, they say no. But
So, because I suppose you travel a lot, but when you're not traveling, do you switch off from travel content, or are you still kind of like thinking about what you're going to do next, or you're editing videos or anything like what's your normal day to day when you're not traveling?
Working on the content basically. So so writing scripts, sorting out scripts, sorting out the B-roll. So I it's sort of, I mean, I sort of retired from corporate life, and I probably work more, like at least almost as much. So, and I keep saying I'm going to dial back, but no, I would come, like when I come back from this trip, then I've got loads of notes and all the B-roll which I've sorted out. But then I'm focusing on getting those scripts written, recorded, and all that sort of stuff. But then also sorting out the videos that are in the pipeline, working on the thumbnails and posting them and all that stuff. So when I'm not on a trip, I'm normally working on finishing off content, getting content ready to get edited, and or plotting out the next thing. Which is why I try the other advantage of, which was a good decision, I think anyway, of deciding I was only going to fund all my own trips, was I can then decide when I go. So I try to go on a trip and then have 3 or 4 weeks at home in between. Also because it means from a home life, it's less disruptive. But then I have time that I can clear stuff out, get ready for the next trip, and go on the next trip, etc. So that's kind of what I do.
But I suppose what's good about the fact that you're funding your own cruises as well is that at least you're able to give honest advice about what you think, and that you're not getting like the cruises are that they're not funding them, so that you have to kind of be seen to give them a positive review as well because they're funding. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and I know, I'll tell you my personal view. I'm sure people who've gone to think is, cruise lines, when before I made that decision, when I first started, before I really focused on YouTube, is that cruise lines, generally speaking, don't tell you what to say. But I feel there is like, that you're on. I mean, cruise lines aren't going to send people on trips. They're sending you because they want a good review.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Put it bluntly. And I feel like you just have an inbuilt, whether it's avert or not, to you're building that into your thinking. So I often will look at what people aren't talking about, for example. So what aren't you talking about as much as what you are talking about? But it's not. But I do watch. I mean, and I feel like your audience, people aren't stupid. People are. Your audience is intelligent enough to understand that. So people just need to be very upfront if they are going on trips. I feel a little bit gets smoke and mirrors. I watch lots of, like, I'm very into like watching videos about camera gear and equipment and stuff like that. And most of those people get sent the cameras, partly because then their stuff can come out on the day. Yeah. But I know, and they're very upfront. They say, look, DJI sent me this camera and I went out and did this. But so, and I can read between the lines and look at what's what and stuff. But so, but you're right. I feel like if I watch a camera review where I know the guy or gals spent the $600 buying the camera, I sort of feel, okay, like they're going to tell me, actually, this is a bit flimsy, or this is a bit, but I just feel it's a little bit richer. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on that topic, but that's fine. But it's worked for me.
I get it. Yeah, no, I do get it, to be fair. Is like, are there any videos that you've made that you're especially proud of, or that had an unexpected reaction on your YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes some videos I assume will do less well than others, and when they do really well. So, for example, I know stuff on Antarctica, which I love. I think are some of the nicest videoing and stuff that I've made, but I know they won't get like mega views. But then I did a video around, which was a spin on it, which was around, things that the lines don't really tell you about expedition cruising until you're on board. And the reason that idea came to me with just how I saw people were kind of surprised at certain things that happened, or the cruise line, the expedition team went out of their way to keep reminding people that this is not like any other cruise. We have no idea whether we're going to be able to do any of this itinerary because it all depends on the ice, the snow, blah, blah, blah. We have no idea. But people were getting really upset because it said, well, hang on now, it said we were going to be in, go through the Lemon, such a channel today. It's like, well, we can't get there because there's ice. Yeah. And people got really upset because they're used to going around, Europe, and you're almost certainly going to get into every port. Occasionally you miss the port. So I made a video around, through observations, around things that people don't really appreciate, and I thought that'll be fair enough. It's quite specialist and whatever. And that video just exploded. And then I get that's. Those little gems are quite exciting. Yeah.
No, that's good. And if you had to pick one cruise that you could do again tomorrow, what would it be like right now?
It would always be Antarctica, and the close second would be the Panama Canal. I just adore the Panama Canal.
Okay.
Just think it's incredible. But yeah, Antarctica would be it. Yeah.
And have you any exciting cruises or projects coming up this year for anything that you can kind of give us an exclusive on where you're going next?
I don't think it can be an exclusive because I've put it all on my website, to be honest. But probably a lot of people don't. But I actually list all my cruises on my website at tipsfortravellers.com. I have a thing called Future Cruises. But one I'm personally very excited about this year specifically is I've always wanted to do a West Africa trip, and I've never found one that kind of worked. So I'm doing a West Africa trip in October, which goes from Barcelona all the way down to Cape Town.
Oh, nice.
And it's almost a month long, and it's on Region Navigator, so it's quite a small 430 passenger ship. And obviously Region's a very nice line to go with. But it's on a ship which actually they're taking out of service. It's actually going to be converted into a residential ship for another company.
Okay.
They're leasing it out to them at the end of in 26, I think. Anyway, yeah, in 26. But anyway, it's a very quirky ship. It was built originally as a Russian spy ship originally, and then when the Soviet Union all unraveled, the base got sold. So it's a very interesting ship, but it's a very small kind of ship, so it's got a very interesting itinerary. That's the one. I know content about West Africa will not be particularly popular unless I can find a good angle for it. History, but that's one it's almost like kind of one one for me. That's probably the one I'm most excited about.
That's
coming
cool,
up. But
yeah,
all my trips I'm excited about. I always say I always get excited about those trips, but that's the one I'm most looking forward to this year.
We got to go to Morocco last year, and that was my first time ever in North Africa and stuff, so it was nice. But yeah, I'd like to kind of see a bit more of Africa, South Africa as well. It would be so, like, when you go on that cruise, are you going right down around the bottom of South Africa as well?
No, so actually the cruise I'm on, I get off in Cape Town.
Okay.
But I did with Silver Sea a couple of the beginning of 24. I did a Cape Town to Cape Town, sort of going up to Namibia and then to Durban and Richards Bay and stuff. I would love to do the next leg, which goes up through Mozambique, Madagascar, Seychelles and stuff. But no, so that's just going down to Cape Town. So I would like to do the other cruises on the other side. Tend to sort of, they'll go Mozambique, that they go to Madagascar. They tend to sort of go Mauritius, Seychelles, because their ships are often heading off into Asia or heading down to Australia. So they don't tend to do a lot of that stuff. Plus, you get into pirate territory once you get up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've got some pirates otherwise then.
Yeah, and then the other problem is, of course, ships can't go through the Suez Canal, so a lot of them change their itineraries, and they sort of they either head back to Europe or they sort of head across and then right to Japan. Yeah.
Gary, I could talk to you all day, to be honest. It's like there's been, like, I knew when I had you coming on for the chat, I was like, I could talk to you all day, but it's been brilliant talking to you. Thanks so much for sharing your time and your insight. For anyone who hasn't already, where's the best place for them to follow you online?
So the best, of course, is YouTube. So Tips for Travelers on YouTube, and then on socials, like my Facebook is very active. Again, that's Tips for Travelers, but also Instagram. But Instagram is actually Gary Bembridge. But what I do on Instagram is when I'm on trips, I post loads and loads of short story. So if I'm on a trip and you want to get a sense of the destinations, there I'll post lots about destinations, the ship and stuff. So those are probably the best places. I do have a blog, but that's less active, but yeah.
Okay, no, brilliant. I'm going to link all that in the show notes anyway. Everyone, make sure, if you're not following Gary already, you need to make sure you follow him, whether you're a new cruiser or a seasoned traveler. There's always something that you can learn from Gary. Hey, Gary, thanks again for coming on. To everyone listening, don't forget to rate and follow Port to Port wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, happy sailing.